just landed. I literally landed in my bag exactly how I carry. This is a product that we've been working on for well over a year now, and through our journey to try and decipher exactly how specific component changes inside the motors affect the end result of the motor's performance, I could summarize that entire discussion as it depends. And if any of you guys watch Linus Tech Tips, a lot of his reviews and discussions come out to it depends. And in this case, it truly does depend. I have spoken at lengths in previous videos about how I thought magnets affect things like this, windings affect things like that, stators affect things like this and that, and sizes affect things like that and this. But at the end of the day, it depends. It all depends on the final amalgamation of components that you put in the motor that result in the final motor's performance. And before continuing on, I'll cut this short and just give you the end result of what the actual performance benefits of running this motor are. So this particular version that you're looking at is the what we're calling the Imperial version, just because it kind of looks like it fell off the armor of a stormtrooper. But this motor and the other version, which I'll talk about a little bit later in the video, are both built to the same specifications. They're both built to be very high quality motors, and the specific size is unique. It is not a size that has been popularized before or is well known, and the overall end performance benefits of this motor are specifically throttle control and altitude control. Those two go hand in hand. It's not specifically response or anything in particular, because all that depends on many other factors. Specifically, something that you will notice consistently from prop to prop, build to build, quad to quad, is that you will have an improvement in overall altitude control and throttle control. Maybe the easiest way is for me to show you this flight clip. What you're seeing me do is just fly willy-nilly. I had just built this quad with the new motors. I hadn't done anything special to tune it, nothing at all. This is the very first flight out, and I was just testing the motors. And I had already tested many previous versions of this motor, and what you're seeing is that I'm pulling out of these dives and doing these maneuvers consistently. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just arbitrarily flying with no direction and no desire to do anything specific, but I'm just flying to try and put myself in difficult positions. Now, I don't fly in a way that puts my quads in jeopardy most of the time. And I do that specifically because I don't have time to fix my quad or deal with what might happen if I do something wrong and it crashes. So in this scenario, I'm not really pushing it, and I'm really just flying willy-nilly, like nothing, not even paying attention. But what you may notice is that I'm pulling out of dives that I don't even know is coming without hesitation and almost no altitude wobble. And what I mean by that is that when you pull out of dives, sometimes if you're a little bit anxious or a little bit nervous, you might either pull out of the dive early, or you might pull out of the dive and kind of balloon up a bit. And this is specifically the advantage to this motor. Now, there are some other benefits in the throttle control area, but for the most part, this is the core improvement in performance that you will notice. And some people, more than one tester, have said that it almost feels like running this motor adds skill. And that's really nice to hear, because I really have worked super duper hard on this motor. And again, there are two versions of this motor. There is this version, which is the very nice white, pretty version, and there's also this version, which is also still pretty. It's got more of a darker emerald green look to it with the same white bell to it. These two motors are made by different manufacturers. One manufacturer is just a little bit more cost effective at manufacturing motors than the other manufacturer. Otherwise, they are both identical in flight performance. I mean, I literally cannot tell the difference between the two motors in the air. So regardless of which one you get, performance, build quality, all that is going to be consistent between the two. Now, I haven't crashed both of them. My testers haven't crashed both of them enough to be able to tell me if one is particularly more durable than the other. But I mean, they're both made of 7075 aluminum. They're both made of all the same high-end quality components, so they should be very comparable to one another. That's the summary in a very brief 7 minutes. But now let's go over a couple more intricacies of the motor. Now, I'll show you the stator comparisons. The stator on the right that you're looking at is a 2306 size stator, and the stator on the left is the motor that I am presenting to you today, the Imperial motor, or the FPVCycle 5-inch motor. And you might notice that the motor on the left is a whole lot larger than the motor on the right, because it is a much larger motor. But I don't want you to think of it as a larger motor, because it's not designed to compete with huge motors. And I point that out only because you don't necessarily need to choose a certain size motor for a certain size build. You choose a motor based on the performance output that you want. You could run a 2306 motor with 2500 kV on 6S and an 800 gram quad, and it will perform comparably to a larger motor with lower kV as the smaller motor with the higher kV. It all depends on the flight performance you're after. So I'm gonna cut that particular discussion short because it kind of can be lengthy, and I'll jump into the weight of this motor. So this motor, with reasonable wires, these are not the shortest wires and it's not the longest wire. The motor itself is about 18.8% larger than your typical 2306 motor. And with this long length of wire, it comes in at 33.7 grams, which I can't really show clearly on camera, but you'll have to take my word for it, 33.7 grams. The motor without the wire at all comes out to 31.5 grams. So now let's take a look at a couple of other motors. The Emax Eco 2 Series 2306 with comparable length wire comes out to 34 grams. This is actually the RCN Power Smooks 2306.5, which is actually previously my favorite motor, because it's just got so much power and performance for the given motor size and weight and all. This was really a phenomenal motor, and this was the original motor that we redesigned for our purpose to make it our 5-inch motor. But then I was continuing to research more and more, and I found other benefits, and I didn't want to come out with one motor and then have to remake a new motor and change the lineup. So I just decided to forego this entire line of motors and move on to the next generation of motor that I was already working on. This motor comes out 33.1 grams with shorter wire than the final motor that we have. So overall, the weight of this motor is comparable to a 2306 or a 2306.5 size motor. Now, there are a couple other motors in there. This is an a Mox Eno 2306 motor with long-ish wires, comes out to 35 grams. This is the Bison motor from RCN Power, also a phenomenal motor, by the way. Comes out to 36 grams. That's because it has a pretty large 11 millimeter bearing in there, which is arguable whether it actually gives you any particular advantage. I actually went backwards, and this motor has a 9 millimeter bearing in it because I didn't really find that big of a benefit to the 11 millimeter bearing, other than the fact that if you smash it into concrete over and over, the bearings will hold up better. However, your motor will be destroyed and you won't be able to run it anymore anyways. So what's the point of a bearing that holds up when the rest of the motor does not? Moving on, this is the Cyber motor from iFlight, and this one comes in with comparable wire at 34 grams. So comparable weight. And this is another fantastic motor from RCN Power, the Wasp. The Wasp motor, which is a weird 22.6 by 6.5 size, and it comes out at 33 grams with all the wire, which is just a little bit longer than the wire that we have on the motor that we're presenting today. So I'm just showing you here that this motor is about 18+% larger than all these motors that you see here that are smaller than it, yet the overall weight is comparable. And if you wanted to average it, it probably weighs about 0.3 to 0.4 grams heavier than your typical 2306 or 2207 or anything of that size. 2207 motors tend to weigh more than 2306 motors. So all these motors are lighter than your 2207 or 2207.5. And that's about as far as I want to go in this video. Like I said, it's been well over a year. I've been testing motors left and right, up and down, back and forth from the same manufacturer, from the same couple of 3 different manufacturers, trying to figure out exactly how all the components change the performance of the motor. And at the end of the day, is really no consistent way to figure out how to tune a motor aside from just making the darn thing and testing it in the real world to see what the end result is. Now, I have tested literally 0.5 millimeter increments in every direction of this motor. I have actually considered increasing the height by 0.5 millimeter because having slightly more magnet height will give it a little bit more efficiency. However, it also makes its heat higher. It increases the heat of the motor because you have less surface area to volume ratio of the actual stator. So it may not actually make any difference in efficiency. The efficiency of this motor compared to your typical 2306 is actually very, very close. However, if you're kind of racing really fast and hardcore, which a lot of the times I just fly really fast, you will tend to see just a couple percentage points lower efficiency, which is annoying to me, but I am flying really fast. And the quads that we fly today are more along the lines of 750 plus grams with a Hero camera and a Vista in there and all the stuff that we run these days. So this motor is really designed to give you the performance that you want in those not higher weight, but today's weight quads that need to carry all the equipment that we require today. Now, if your quad happens to weigh around the 670 gram mark or under 700 grams, the performance of this motor is beyond stellar. It's just, it gets exaggerated the lower the weight is, as in the throttle performance, the overall power, everything of this motor just gets exaggerated. Oh, another thing I want to point out is that the motor comes in 1880 kV and 2200 kV. These are very specific kV numbers intended for 5S and 6S. Throttle cuts work great, or overall motor outputs do work fantastic. However, it is still better to have your motor be around the kV that you want it to be for the given voltage that you're expecting to run. This motor is about refining performance more than anything else, and so it's really been refined down to these little minute differences, and I believe that the majority of people that try this motor will definitely be able to tell that it has been refined and the performance is definitely different than your typical 2306 or your typical 2207 that all pretty much perform very similar to one another. So that's about it for now. Thank you so much for watching. I'm actually proud of this motor, so I hope that people really enjoy it because I don't expect it to be changing anytime soon. And going with larger size motors will overall give you more power, but it all needs to be tuned for the quad that you're planning on running. So this is not designed for the super light quad. It's actually not designed for super heavy quads, as in 800 gram quads need not apply here. But it is designed for today's quad of between 700 and 760, 770 grams or so. That's the sweet spot of where the overall performance is excellent. The lower the weight, the better always. Take care, floss your teeth. Bye-bye.